After the filler issue that was Fish Story, let's see if Mark Waid's Flash run is back on track with the next two issues. Those being issues 67 titled Misdirection and 68 Beat the Clock, reintroducing the classic Flash villain of Abra Kadabra, and is written by Mark Waid, drawn by Greg LaRocque, inked by Jose Martin Jr., lettered by Tim Harkins, colored by Matt Hollingsworth, and edited by Brian Augustin. But each issue has a different associate editor, those being Frank Pieteris and Ruben Diaz, respectively. For anyone who isn't aware, Abra Kadabra first appeared in The Flash Volume 1, issue 128, back in the Silver Age. He's a time traveler from the 64th century who uses advanced technology that looks like magic, and despite having a silly name, he's not only a very powerful threat, but also insane. If you've watched my Zatanna video, you'd know I have a strong love for magical characters, and while Abra Kadabra isn't technically one of them, he still matches that aesthetic. He also has the same showman attitude that Zatanna has, but is a complete psychopath that will hurt everyone around him while doing so. Like I said, this story involves his grand return from his previous battle with Wally, which the story catches you up on, by the way, and when he sees that his name is being used by another stage magician, he is furious. Once he arrives at the event, he turns the stage magician into a card and causes chaos without fail, even with the Flash and a time cop from his century coming in to stop him. But his attack on the stage show is not the full extent of his power or psychotic nature. No, he's looking to blow up all of Keystone City. Thankfully, the Flash is able to stop Kadabra, but only because they're both sent into the 64th century, Kadabra's home timeline, where he is the leader of the oppressed people there. Yeah, not only is Kadabra stupidly overpowered to the point where he could take out an entire city, but he's also a symbol of revolution back home. While it is clear the people of this century are oppressed by an authoritarian government, the story doesn't forget that Abra Kadabra is still an evil that needs to be stopped. Like I said, he has the attitude of a showman, as he changes into a very 90s costume and gets tricked by Wally into basking in his crowd's cheers for entertainment, which escalates into him leading his followers into a revolution. But Wally knows how dangerous Kadabra can be, so he's taken back to the 20th century, stripped of his power and chucked into prison, where no one will indulge in his tricks. Yeah, we've got a haunting ending for a Flash comic, because it's not only just a huge hit to his ego, but also the entire scene is stripped in black to show how isolated he is, now that he's lost his powers and his followers. Speaking of haunting, I love that the artist Greg LaRocque gave Kadabra this very horrifying look, as if his skin has been melting. I mean, he was caught in an explosion in his last encounter with the Flash, so it only makes sense. But the look is cool and it adds to his psychotic nature. If you're wondering about the fake Abra Kadabra, he's also a huge showman and an egotist. For example, when Wally tells him about his real-life counterpart and how it might be a bad idea to take his name, fake Abra just brushes it off like it's nothing. But this causes him karma as the real Abra Kadabra comes in and turns him into a giant card for what seems to be the rest of his life. Yeah, I'm not too sure if this means the guy is dead or not either. The story kind of implies he died, but I don't think it was clear enough, as it just shows his transformation into a card without stating his death or coming back to it at the end of the next issue. That's just me though, I just would have liked some clarity. Wally was pretty good throughout this arc as well. He does show off as the one-man basketball team for the Pied Pipers homelessness charity event, which was cool. While he has his misgivings about the fake Abra, he does try to save his life, even if it is unsuccessful. When Abra appears, Wally focuses on him to keep him from causing collateral damage at the arena, even if that also proves to be unsuccessful. In response to this, Wally entertains the idea of killing Abra, but his care for life is too big as he decides to save Abra anyway, even if he makes an escape. Once Abra decides to destroy Keystone, Wally decides to put his own life on the line to save it. Although this does get him flung into the 64th century alongside Abra, he's at least saved Keystone from total destruction. But his problems aren't yet behind him, because he sees that Abra's timeline is a civilization controlled by a giant algorithmic machine called the Chronarch. Wally can see the obvious implications of this and stands up to the regime, even if he has to indirectly work with someone as dangerous as Abra. Once he's got Abra distracted, Wally works as quickly as possible to find the mechanism controlling the whole society. He finds out that it's controlled by a series of metal discs, and decides to add his own speed to overload it and give the people their individuality back. While Wally does have concerns as to whether or not he should be doing this, he smiles anyway and destroys the mechanism. With all of that taken care of, Wally returns to see that Abra and his followers have completely taken over the city, and not wanting him to be crowned king of the 64th century, for fear of what he could do with that power, he tricks Peregrine into sending them both back into the 20th century. Now that Wally is finally back home, he takes this opportunity to strip Abra's technology away and put him back behind bars. So, I'd say that was an overall decent story. However, I do have a couple of issues that are similar to my criticisms of Fish Story. I think the first part was a well-done setup issue, reintroducing Abra Kadabra and getting us into the future storyline. But while I still like the second part, it's where I start having issues. While we do get the basics of what the future is like and why Abra and his followers are revolting against the regime, I feel we could have spent more time in the future. I would have liked to have known some of Abra's followers as individuals. Like, do they actually like their leader, or are they just following him because he's the only one taking a stand against their government? Or, if they are blindly following him, would Wally be able to try making them realize they don't need to follow a madman just to take a stand against the government? If you ask me, that would be such an interesting dilemma to follow. I also would have liked to have seen a similar dilemma with the Peregrines, realizing that the Chronarch's will doesn't have to be the be-all end-all of order. But no, they're all just mindless soldiers working under a fascist regime, even the one that helped Wally track Abra. It sucks because that could have been interesting if it at least happened with her. The Chronarch could have been more fleshed out as well. He does cause an interesting question of whether it might be best if individuality was stripped away from people in order to keep peace, even if the obvious answer is no. But after we first meet him, he's never really seen again. It would have been cool if we got to see his reaction to Wally tampering with his central clockworks, possibly trying to fight him off to make him seem like more of a threat. But sadly, that didn't happen. But even with all of those complaints in mind, I'd say that Misdirection and Beat the Clock are still a really solid two-parter story. It brings back a beloved Flash villain with a cool new look, creates some interesting world building for the 64th century, and has a great message of anti-authoritarianism. Definitely not a favourite Flash story in my opinion, as I feel the story could have been stretched out over 2 more issues to go more in depth with this concept. But overall, I still think it's pretty enjoyable. And that is the end of the video, and I really liked making it, so I'm hoping I can keep talking about Flash comics and just other comic books in general going forward. So if that interests you, I highly recommend subscribing, hitting the notification button, and sharing this video around, so that more people can recognize my analytical talents when it comes to comic books. Anyway, I'm Jedi-Liam 64, and I think I've taken up enough of your time. So, I'll see you all later.